Hello guys, Digit here, and yes, Michael is my real name, and today I'm gonna go through my 2 years of playing GT Sport and my improvement in that period. So, also I decided to take Lewis Hamiton's time trial times that I said about 2 years ago. I think it was actually a year and 7 months to be precise. And what is the reason for that? I got it on my channel, and those were one of my first videos that I ever made for this channel, for Digigaming, and the channel was a little bit different than it is now. So yeah, a little bit before I started doing track guides and all of that. So when I did the challenge in 2019, some tracks were really hard and really difficult, like Suzuka, Mount Panorama, and I don't even want to mention Willow Springs. I think I even spent a couple of days trying to figure that track out, and at one point I actually thought about giving up on that, but eventually beat Lewis's time by, I think it was just marginal, maybe 20-30 thousandths of a second, nothing more than that. And for this video I tried to match or even improve my previous times, and the results in the end of this were really surprising in my eyes. So yeah guys, without further ado, let's get going. And first up was this Dragon Trail Seaside track, and I kind of struggled to get a really good result, but to beat Lewis Hamiton's time, I think it only took me like a couple of laps now. It wasn't much of an issue just to get those apexes right. That was the biggest problem for me, just to perfect the lap and be a little bit quicker, because this car actually behaves a little bit different than the normal Mercedes AMG in Group 3. But as you can see, I tried to keep it under control. It was going really well at this point, second into the third gear, and I was already a lot in front of Lewis's time, so I think I was even like a 2 to 3 tenths faster than my previous result here. And as you can see here now, the gap is going to about 8 tenths, and slowly reaching that 1 second gap. This was really significant, and the biggest difference that I did here was moving my braking bias, because in my first video that I ever put in this channel, it was Dragon Trail Seaside, and I used the -3 braking balance. So in 2 years I kind of learned how to use a braking balance and just did it in my favor, so it was +2 at the back, and it really helps so much just to know what braking balance to use on which part of the track. And as you can see, I had the gap now increased to almost 1, and I would say, yeah, it was 1 second at a time. I lost a bit of time here, but again, did a really good exit in this last corner. So in the end, I improved my lap time by so much. It even went under 1:36 here. You can see 1:35.9, and this was like a really big improvement. And I think I only spent like 20 minutes on this track, and it was really surprising for me. I mean, the next track on this one was Laguna Majori, and again we're gonna be using the Mercedes GT3 car, and this is the track that I really didn't struggle the most. It was other tracks that I kind of struggled the most, because this was in this week's dailies, and when you have a really familiar track, it's really not hard to get used to the other cars like this one. So it was a sub 2-minute lap, and as you can see, I already improved. I think it only took me like 15 minutes to improve on this one, and it was 1:55 about 1. So I improved on my time quite a lot. My lap time record was really looking good at this point, and I just I hit all of my sectors right. Everything was looking really good at that point, and I was I was a lot in front, not to lie here, and just the sector times were speaking for itself, and the experience I had on this track really proved to be a significant role in this one. I knew every braking point, so the learning curve was not really that significant. It only took me, like, as I said, 15 minutes to adjust to the new car, found my new braking zones, because this car is a little bit different. It's not the BOP on, and everything was a little bit different, but at the same time it just looked so familiar, and I was just so much into this track and so much into this combo that it only took me just a couple of laps to settle down, find the rhythm, and I wasn't even pushing to the limit here. I think I missed a couple of apexes here, but again, we really moved that margin up, so the gap was I mean, the gap was in the end really huge on Lewis Hamilton's time, and I crossed the finishing line here in 1:54.8, which was quite surprising for me, and the gap, as you can see on the screen, was quite significant for this one. And now we got Brents Hatch. It was the third one on this challenge, and I find this track really hard to get right, because even the tiniest mistake here means so much in the end, and just the tiniest, I would say, if you go a little bit too wide on the exit of some corners, this can be really problematic, and the understeer this car is producing might seem really difficult to control, and in practice it is really difficult to control, and sometimes I even thought it's almost impossible to turn in as Lewis was turning in some corners, but I was just improving lap by lap by lap, and this one didn't really take me that long. It only took me a couple of minutes to get done right, but I mean, I figured out how to do the track. I mean, how to use this car, and of course it was this week's daily, but in Group 4, and it was a little bit different because Group 3 and Group 4, and especially this one, this car is, you know, it is a little bit different, but you have the same braking zones. I'm using kind of the same markers, and it just, you know, took me a little bit less time than I expected just to settle down into the rhythm and get a really fast time here. And this was actually beating Lewis's time by not a lot. So on other challenges I was really pushing to the limit, but here it was only like 3/10 quicker lap time, and it wasn't really a big, I would say, a big improvement on my personal best that I did like 2 years ago, but I mean, it only took me 7 minutes in the end. So now we're gonna jump into Willow Springs, and I think this was the hardest challenge that I ever done, and I think I spent like 2 days just trying to fight it. I mean, even more days, I think like 2 to 3 days. I was constantly struggling with this track, struggling to find the rhythm, and just to get those perfect. It was actually about those perfect lines, because it looks like Lewis was, I think, really practicing on this one, finding the gears and finding everything on this track, and it was just about perfect for him. That's my opinion, but he did a really awesome job, and I mean, a really hard challenge to beat. And 2 years ago, when I first got into this challenge, my best time, I was so furious at the point, my best time was 1:11.316, which is 0.008 of a second slower than it should be just to beat this challenge. And this was the run, actually this wasn't the run, this was my fastest run now, and as you can see here, it's already looking much faster than that, and I don't know, about, I mean, 2 years is a long period of time, and you just found the cars really, I would say, more natural in a way that you just know what to do with certain situations. You eventually become so much faster, and you don't really know what the reason for that is. It just becomes so natural, but when you think about it, then it really makes a difference, and then it really makes sense. Like this one at Suzuka, again, one really hard track to get done right, and it was again one of the hardest challenges here. And this one actually took me a little bit more time than I expected, so this was about 20, I think it was about 20 minutes worth of time here, and I was expecting, I was just expecting a little bit more out of this one, but I got it down to 57.7 in the end, which was again really good lap time, despite that I made a couple of mistakes, and just the lap time wasn't the best time. It wasn't perfect, and by any means it wasn't the best thing that I possibly could do, but just to perfect those really tiny mistakes like this one, this is really not a mistake, but you could carry a bit more speed in this section. And again, the hairpin at this point, so I probably could be a little bit quicker through this point, but as you can see here, it was fairly decent, and I just decided to carry on. And I mean, the difference that really, the difference between those top drivers and what you usually do and what I usually do is just so marginal that sometimes it's not even noticeable. And this track was one of those tracks. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense to me that they, for example, when I look into top 10 leaderboard, I see, okay, he did a gear change there, so it doesn't really make much of a sense to me to make a gear shift there. But once you really look into it, and once you really start thinking about what he did and what is good for the lap, then you slowly get into the rhythm, make those small adjustments and really find the pace and find the rhythm, which is again a really important thing to do.
No way. How did you do that?
Well, I did it, and now we're gonna skip into Monza, and this was, I think, one of the easiest challenges, and I think it only took me one lap and one try to get this one right. So about, 2 minutes, sub 2 minutes, I guess. So on 140, I think it's 146 point something. And just, it wasn't really that difficult. I didn't even change a lot of things in this lap. And as you can see, we're gonna start the lap right now. I even had my braking balance 0 and traction control on at this point. So first thing to do here is to move the braking bias a little bit to the back and move your traction control to off. And as you can see here, I was changing it to 2, braking at the 150 meter mark, downshifting into second, getting above this little curb here, first gear, and full throttle out. And again, I knew those braking points, so when I do the dailies, when you do the FIAs or whatever track there is, so this just becomes so natural to always brake at 150. You have sometimes those really small adjustments, but again, the gap here on the right was another braking zone. Again, second, third gear on the way out, and it was, this track was so natural for me that I wasn't even thinking about what I was doing. So third gear, staying in third and just waiting for that shadow, revving it up in third gear, looking for the 50 meter mark. Not a lot of trail braking, so I could carry a bit more speed, and it just all connected together. And I don't think really Lewis did a great job here, so I was already about half a second up on his best time, and I knew the braking points. Again, the gap on the right was braking, going above this curb, third gear, half of the throttle in, looking for the fourth gear, a little bit of understeer here, and we are really looking good at this point. So just one straight and actually one braking zone here, and I was using this mark at 100 meters. You could probably brake a little bit later than that, but it was in the end really good lap time. And I'm just gonna cross the finishing line, and as you can see here, it was my first try and I wasn't pretty much doing anything any other tries after this one. 46.3 and a big gap to my previous time. So I have a second, I would say almost a half a second improvement with just one try here. And now we're gonna jump into Mount Panorama, braking in between those 150 meter marks, and really, I would say, really letting the car coast through most of the sections here, because this car doesn't really like to be trail broken like that. It doesn't really like that trail braking. A little bit of trail braking is good, but not a lot with this one. So braking after the 100 meter sign, again, second gear, and on the way out, you probably saw that I could have carried a bit more speed, but changing my braking bias for this section because it's so easy to get carried away, and as you can see, the back of the car is sliding so much, so that's why I'm kind of taking it easy, not really pushing to the limit at this point, kind of avoiding the walls. And this one was actually one of the hardest challenges that I tried when I was first doing this one. I think it took me like 2 hours to get done right, if I remember correctly. I really remember this track because this downhill section was something that I was really struggling with. I was trying to keep the car under control, and as you can see here, I was sliding a little bit, but nothing too serious. And on the way out, not really hitting the wall, fourth gear, taking it easy, and I did a bit of a slide here, but it didn't really affect my time. It kind of affected my time. I lost like 2/10, but still carried the advantage, carried almost half a second advantage on Lewis's time, and by this point it was actually looking quite good, so almost half a second up. And now we got just 2 corners. Those were actually 3 corners if you count this middle one. So downshifting into second quickly on the power, third gear, and I kind of decided to leave the braking bias at 0, not to get a lot of oversteer because of this downhill section. Second gear, and yeah, again, taking it easy, and we're gonna cross the finishing line, and it's probably gonna be a sub 2:01, and it is a sub 2:01 with just a couple of minutes done here. And that didn't really took me that much time just to get this lap together. And again, big improvement on what I've done before. And now we got Interlagos, and the biggest difference that I did here was trying to take it easy. So at the point I was doing the Lewis Hamiton Time Trial in 2019, I was really pushing to the limit every corner. It was, it was just pushing all the way along the track, so I was braking super late, trail braking into every corner, and I was really not that much into focusing on just letting the car coast, taking it easy, and moving the braking bias in areas where you actually need it the most. For example, here I moved the braking bias to 3 just to get a lot of, I would say a little bit more out of the back end. So yeah, you can see it's sliding a little bit more, but again, not too much. Still here, second gear, and I knew just to, take it easy this corner because it's super easy to spin. Also, this one is a slight uphill section down into first and quick upshift into second gear. Really helps with the rotation of the car and the acceleration out of that one, and also gives you a good angle for this next corner, which I usually brake right before that 50-meter sign. And again, really using the whole width of the track here and into third, and in the end fourth gear, and taking it on the curb. So I was trying to stay as close as possible to the curb, but this was, probably Lewis wasn't aware of this kind of how this game works, so he just took a little bit of a wider line. But I got this one in 1:30.7, which was again not a big improvement, but I only spent like a couple of minutes here. I would say mostly this track was similar to Interlagos, only a couple of minutes spent here, but I was actually improving quite a lot lap by lap here. So first one was quite good, and also we've got the next manufacturer series here, so I was practicing a little bit more on this track just a couple of minutes ago before I started doing this. So it just became so much more natural to me than what it is like 2 years ago. And already I was not 2 seconds, I was 2/10 in front, and knew my braking zones, knew how much should I brake, even missed this one slightly, but again got a nice exit and a nice really nice exit here out of third gear, and was able to pull away from Lewis's time. So just trying to stay as close as possible here to the line, braking here, taking the wider line here, just going for that late apex and up into that third gear. And you can see I'm already pulling away from him. I slightly even made a mistake here, I guess. I should have probably stayed on the power, and maybe but it was maybe a little mistake, but nothing too big here on the exit. Third gear, nice and easy, taking it here to the apex. Third gear on the way out, and at this point I was just a tenth in front. But this is the point where usually Lewis makes a big difference. So he either makes a big mistake or I don't know what else. So I'm just trying to cut this corner as much as I can, and I'm already like half a second up on his time. And for some instance I just missed this last corner, and it was still like 4 to 5 tenths quicker than his lap time. So he just made it to those couple of mistakes, so be aware of that. Even if you're struggling with this track, I think on the last corner you can get a lot of time, and the improvement here was also quite significant. And now on the last challenge here, and we got the Nordschleife and this Sauber C9. One of the hardest challenges, that it was actually quite difficult to get this one right, but as you can see I made a couple of mistakes. So this was my first, I would say, bigger mistake, but I was already up on Lewis's time, and I'm kind of not going through this whole lap because it really takes a long time. So my time to beat here was 5 minutes and 40 seconds, and as you can see I was like half a second up on Lewis's time, and that was my best time. And I was already, after just 10%, I would say 10% of the lap, I was 1 second up on his time. So it is already looking quite good. I knew that this car really behaves good when you just don't shift I mean, don't shift the gears too often, so just staying in one gear. For example, here I probably should have stayed in third, because you can see I was revving up second gear quite easy. So sometimes even staying in that higher gear really helps with the traction and the overall speed and the overall, in the end, overall acceleration, because this car takes a lot of time just to shift the gear. And as you can see here, second was probably good idea, but I think third gear here was an even better idea, because just of a slide that it gets. Now I'm gonna skip through this whole lap, because otherwise this is gonna take a really long time. And now a last couple of corners here, and the previous best time was 5:40.1, and here staying in second gear, and we're gonna cross the finishing line in 5:36.1, so almost, just barely out of 4-second reach. And I wasn't really trying hard on this track. I even made a couple of mistakes, and just improvement was so huge. I wasn't expecting this. So now we're gonna make a comparison of my previous times and my current times, and just to, you know, just try to visualize what I was thinking and what I was going through this whole like 2 years, and just to compare those times and put that into some kind of perspective. An improvement over those 2 years was actually quite significant. As you can see, my old times are a little bit different than my new times, and the apparent reason is, of course, I was doing a lot of practice. I learned how to brake, just improved on so many things around this game, just the acceleration, the way the car handles. I got, you know, I just got used to the tracks, I just got used to the cars, and putting I would say putting a decent lap altogether was not really that difficult now. So just try to get up to pace and really do